Yes. Free form. We're going free form.
Yeah, we're going freeform today.
Sometimes you just gotta go with the flow. That's how it's gotta be.
Yep.
Oh, it's been insanity here in America last week. It was just a horrible week.
I've
It was
noticed
such a horrible week.
do you get any sleep? You're so busy taking it all in and letting us know what you think.
Yes, I do that. I do that. Um, you gotta keep up with these people.
Yeah.
It's like what I published a piece yesterday about this whole Warner Bros. Discovery thing. And it's like, the deal itself isn't even closed. Um, and here I am, looking at this, and they're like, oh, Jared Kushner's involved. I'm like, this is connected to real estate and legislation being passed in Serbia. Like, this is not, like
Not
this
just
is the
by Warner Brothers, right?
yeah. It's not. It's like they want Warner Brothers because they want to have a massive monopoly on it's for propaganda, right? Like they can make Batman a fascist. If they get Warner Bros, Batman can be a fucking fascist. You know
Well,
that
that's
that's
not a new story in American film production, right? Second World
no.
War. The Hollywood was called into service to propagandize for the U.S. government and military, and they did a good job. They created actually a very creative job. Created some, especially
Mhm.
cartoons are hilarious. Anti-Hitler cartoons are hilarious. If you haven't seen them, go see them. They're hilarious. You know. What
Yeah,
is it?
no, like they're
Donald Duck and all of the
oh yeah.
characters back then. Very funny stuff. So yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. That's what's up with that. That's
And
going
it's
on all over the place right now. Is just acquisitions nonstop to create a monopoly instead of a capitalist free market system. So whether you're on the left, this is the something we were talking about before we went live, is again, it's not really left versus right anymore because people on the left believe in like some sort of free market capitalism. Anybody who says otherwise is just vilifying their enemy, right? So, is it left? Is it right? No. When an oligarchy takes over, that is no longer left or right. That's oligarchy versus poor people.
right. Yeah, well, that's exactly what it is, right? I mean, like in this whole thing, I was reading something the other day, and I can't remember what it was. I read so many things, but the essence of what it was saying is that the most important part of killing a democracy is convincing people that they like have it made while they actually have nothing at all. And that's what America is, right? Like they've convinced people that they're free. Like it's the most Orwellian dystopian shit ever. Freedom is slavery, right? Like like it's actually like that's genuinely what it is. Like and I read this phenomenal article by Clinton Alden, who I'll have to send you his link because he
Yeah, I don't.
is brilliant, unless you've already read him.
No, I
But
don't.
he's brilliant, and he was talking about how the government makes money and how basically back at the end of World War II, there was this guy who was a pure American capitalist, and he was arguing for the abolition of taxes. And his argument was that basically uh, the government doesn't need to tax you because for any money to come into existence, the government has to write it into existence. It's not like, the Congress has a bank that it borrows from. When they allocate funds, the, Treasury prints that money. That money comes into existence like that. And then it is paid out and it goes into the economy. The argument essentially is that this guy was saying is like, the government doesn't need to worry about paying back its debts. It needs to worry about inflation. because the issue is not that the government, when they say, oh, we can't afford this program, that's an outright lie, because they can afford whatever they want. Because when they moved away from the gold standard, there's no limitation on, they can't say, well, we only have so much in our gold reserves, so we can't put this money out. But the second you basically just say, I can print whatever I want, the value is basically determined on what is attributed to the value of the United States market. Then you are limited by inflation. But income tax itself is not what funds the government. In fact, it has nothing to do. Whatever they're doing with income tax is not the limitation, because if they want to fund healthcare, then they say Congress is going to allocate X amount of money to a social healthcare program. And then they need to worry about, well, will the allocation of this money cause inflation? But if they wanted to say, you know what, we need to, American debt is a problem, right? Like total debt's, over 1.3 trillion dollars now. Then we're going to allocate money to pay that off so that Americans can start saving money and putting it back into the economy, which would in turn reduce inflation, right? But they say we can't afford to do it, when the reality of how this monetary system works, of course, is that they absolutely could, and that they've convinced people that the finite system that was created under a gold standard no longer applies after they made the shift. And they continue to tax to fund these things when they have created a system they don't need to. And the irony is that this guy was arguing for it because he didn't want the government to tax businesses, right? He was an oligarch, and he didn't want them to tax businesses. So his intentions weren't noble. But, Clinton's position is that that doesn't change the fact that what he said was true, and that the income tax and the taxes levied on Americans for all of these things, from specifically, it's important to note, a federal sense. Okay, so a federal government that issues its own currency doesn't need to do this. Now, state and local governments do, in fact, need to do taxes because they don't issue their own currency. But I thought that was exceptionally interesting. And it really just goes to show, like, to your point, this idea of propaganda and this cancel culture that I'm looking at. Oh, you are against taxation? You're a communist, right? In the Red Scare, that's how they kind of buried these ideas for so many years. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've never spent much time with things financial. I'm not good with numbers, and I don't know much about that topic, the
Just the
economy,
concept itself, not
economics.
the.
But you see here, I would ask you this question when you describe what you just described, which I have no counter argument because I haven't read any of the material. But I would say, oh, so you agree with Trump that we're going to just get rid of taxes? People don't need to pay taxes. However, I can't do an imitation of Trump because I'm trying not to listen to him anymore. But he's going around saying, oh, well, eventually nobody will have to pay taxes, because he's read this same material you're talking about, and he believes that somehow he doesn't believe that you need no taxes whatsoever because all you need to do is print money. And I frankly find that to be a little too simple. As
Yeah.
a nation, I find that a little bit simple-minded, because Trump seems to think that you need to tariff. He describes it as tariffing other countries, when of course American businesses are actually paying for it. So it goes against the concept that you just described, right? Where
I'm yeah,
this
I'm so
author
glad you
you're,
actually
this
asked
author
that
you're citing,
question.
this author you're citing
Yeah.
said he wanted to have businesses not pay taxes.
Yeah.
Well, the tariffs on foreign countries, U.S. tariffs on foreign countries, have the effect of U.S. businesses' prices for everything going up, because they have to buy their supplies somewhere outside the states, and that's not going to change with a flick of a pen. This kind of pen that
Right.
goes up and down when it
The
signs
auto pen.
the
The
auto
auto
pen
pen is what he
that
uses,
loves
like
to
Sleepy Joe.
So as I say, I'm not really up on these things, but there's something fishy always going on with taxation. But I don't see how, if you get rid of income tax, that the government can function. And I'd have to look into it, but I find the whole notion that all you have to do is print money and then all of a sudden the problems are solved. It seems too simplistic to me.
Right. And to your point, I'm really glad you asked that question because it brings up the nuance of the argument. And Clinton also touches on this in his article. And I'll make sure actually to link it in when I publish the recording later, so you guys can reference it, because I'm certainly not an expert by any means. I just thought this idea was and really important, and where he did mention that taxation has value as a regulatory measure. So, for example, you can certainly help fund social programs by taxing the rich. Okay. If you want to protect economic equality, um, then you tax the rich. If you want to, for example, limit whether a company pollutes or not, well, you levy a pollution tax that is so exorbitant that they would rather, that's the idea of this carbon tax, which has failed spectacularly, like all forms of economic regulation and environmental regulation in the United States. But the concept remains
And,
the same. As a regulatory measure, it's fantastic. Now, where I think, I think his argument more so is in the idea of taxing the average worker, right? Taking 20% of a paycheck from someone who makes less, because you're effectively regulating their wealth, right? Because it's a regulatory measure.
yeah, well, the idea, it's really clever to pay lip service to these ideas because it makes people feel like things are actually being done, right? So these fines and penalties when polluters and corporations do things that are against environmental regulation, for example, the penalties are so small. It's like a line item on their budget. We have advertising, we have R&D, and we have fines. And fines are usually so minimal that it just doesn't matter to the company, and they'll continue to do whatever they want. But the government can say, look, we've got these regulations. We're regulating business to protect citizens. So it's a shell game. When it's not implemented correctly, it's a shell game. But if the government tries to implement it correctly, the businesses freak out and say, oh, we're going to pull funding from this and that and from your PAC and so on and so forth. And that's another problem, is funding elections in the US is ridiculous. In Canada, it's a little more under control. You can't buy elections in Canada, basically.
Yeah.
That whole, the regulator that taxation is supposed to provide is not being provided because the oligarchs won't let it happen. Now, Robert Reich has said numerous times, if you follow Robert Reich, you get his stats all the time through social media, that this less than 1% of the population that owns 60% of the wealth, those people, if they gave up some small number under 1% of their annual earnings to taxation, in other words, if they actually paid their taxes, it would pay for all social programs. You'd be able to have free education up to university. I mean, the number of things that could be funded if the oligarchs just paid 1% tax is extraordinary. And I just asked the question, well, why isn't that happening? That seems to me to be a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And after the Second World War, big corporations were taxed in the US at 90%.
Yeah. No, it's
90%.
true. And
And
yeah,
there was
no, it's
social
so true.
consensus that they should pay to develop, U.S. industry after and society after the Second World War. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting topic. Um,
Yeah.
how about, since
I'll
we're doing
send you
free
the
farm?
link.
Yeah, please do. I'm
Yeah.
interested to read it because, well, like I say, I'm not super educated on that particular
I'm not
topic.
either. And it's like I constantly like try to immerse myself in that world and in the markets and
Yeah.
these things
So
because It's so important. It's so important when my country in particular is just all these dudes are just using this playground that they have successfully turned our economy into to hoodwink everyone out of money. And it's
Right.
like to have an idea of what we need for things to be better, I have to understand where they do all their grifting,
Yeah.
right? Where how they've grifted the economy. So it's like that's like I did when I went to, community college or whatever, like I couldn't decide what I wanted to do. And at the end of the day, it's like I felt like I was just like dancing around. And so I took my time off from I got my AA in business management. And then I said, okay, there's a degree. Let me go figure out what I want to do with my life. And so eventually I ended up here. Much later in life than I thought I would realize my calling, but so be it. That's just life.
Right.
As I
Right.
and at 25 with my frontal lobe fully developed, now I'm doing investigative journalism and civic engagement. Not what I thought I would be doing. Interviewing a great friend who's not even interviewing, having discussions with a
Right.
great friend who's a Canadian composer. Life is
So
full of surprises for
right.
us.
So you
So,
you bring
yeah.
point, right? The point you bringing up is the intergenerational thing that's kind of happening here, and
Yeah,
also
yeah, let's do that.
that comment that you made about the mind being fully developed at the age of 25. I think that's something that people should take into consideration when they consider all of the evidence about how our society should be structured, and how people growing up, how that should be handled up to the age of 25. And I think there's been a big um, misunderstanding and actual abdication of responsibility of the adults in the room to allow a whole bunch of stuff to emerge in our culture over the past couple of decades, that has really negatively impacted young people under the age of 25. And that's kind of the lead in into the next topic I thought we might explore, and that is uh, the culture of well, some people call it wokeism, which is confusing because there's
I'm
there's good
awake.
wokeism and there's bad wokeism. Okay, so there's good and bad, but the point being that a number of developments have happened in popular psychology in our society that has really weakened people, not made them stronger. And I'll just allude back to one of the comments you made about economy and whatnot, that people feel like they've got it made, and that's why they won't challenge the oligarchs. Well, that's falling apart in the United States because people have always been sort of convinced that, oh, we have a comfortable life, and we're doing reasonably well. But once you're not no longer comfortable, once you're no longer comfortable and you have to actually count all your pennies and buy cheaper food, and you start to really feel like my life's not comfortable anymore, and I just lost my job to AI, and go on a big list of stuff that is negatively impacting your life, then the whole thing falls apart, and the mythology falls apart, and the oligarchs get exposed, and you get mass demonstrations. You get people going to, Bernie Sanders. You get ex-MAGA people going to Bernie Sanders speeches and OAC and so on, and so things are starting to change because that myth is being completely debunked. Let's say. Anyway, so I want to just talk about this book that I read recently called, from a library, of course, I borrow it. The Canceling of the American Mind. Now, this
Yes.
is about cancel culture, okay? Now, cancel culture, it's really interesting, was a big topic during the Biden administration
Hmm.
because there was a lot of activity going on around DEI and woke critique of society and so on, and it was everywhere. And now people are just like scrambling to just stay afloat during the Trump era. And because all of these strange, white nationalists and strange sort of Christian nationalists are all now emboldened and taking center stage, they, they finally get their say, right? And one of the things, I'm just going to take a bit of a risk here, but one of the potential benefits of this awful time that we're living through is that people will take a second look at some of the extreme wokeism that is close to fascism, which I've talked about on our previous episodes. Um, that people are taking a second look at that and now being a little more critical of all sorts of things that are happening in the society, and not just immediately and kind of knee jerk saying, oh, it's left, it's right. I think people are starting to develop what we're developing here, that a dialogue, and starting to realize that it's not all left and right anymore, right? So the culture that created this fragile state, um, it's if you read the introduction to this book, and we should put a link. Can you stick a link actually in the chat
Yeah. Yeah,
to
I
the?
can. So if you guys want to look at this, there's a link that I'm putting in the chat here that you can copy in and place and read later if you would like as well. And I will put it in the recording as well.
Oh, okay. So, and is that the link to the document that I sent you earlier?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's a share folder. Okay, so here are the three great untruths as written in a book called The Coddling of the American Mind, which was the book that was written by one of these authors before this book. So he summarizes it in the foreword, and I think it's very interesting to think about how our culture has been influenced by these ideas in the past couple of decades, I would say. So the three great untruths are the untruth of fragility, the untruth of emotional reasoning, and the untruth of us versus them. So the untruth of fragility basically proposes that what doesn't kill you makes you weaker. And of course, this is the opposite to a saying that I grew up with of Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, his dictum that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And that's what I grew up with. Go forth, experiment, explore, do things that are difficult, do things that challenge you, because that will make you stronger. Okay. And the fragility proposal is the opposite. Oh, be careful, don't go forth. If something offends you, speak up right away. In other words, in your fragile and uneducated state, whatever comes in front of you that might make you feel uncomfortable, you have to try to get rejected as soon as possible. So, yeah, which is basically what I said. I've just kind of done it in my own words. I've summarized what is written here in the foreword. But here's an example. If you shield your child from all dirt, germs, and viruses, you block the development of the immune system, and you condemn your child to a lifetime of autoimmune diseases. Perfect example of being fragile and protected instead of going out there and getting bruised and falling down and failing and all those things that build your character and that you learn from and you build yourself up. If you shield your child from all risk, teasing, and exclusion, you block the development of normal social and emotional skills, and you condemn your child to a lifetime of anxiety and social incompetence. Anxiety, social incompetence. That's kind of where we're at when you just look at TikTok feeds and you look at people spewing shit in the comments and just, I don't know what they feel when they do that, but it might be some, very lame way to try to make themselves feel better about their anxious and disempowered state. I would say disempowered. So, number two, the untruth of emotional reasoning. Always,
Before you go on, I'd love to
yeah,
I think yeah, I would love to talk about just that for a second because
yeah,
I think this idea of sheltering and these things, and I was kind of talking about this a little bit earlier, like when we were talking before. And it's like they're being woke or sheltering does not mean that or stop, like what am I trying to say? So basically, you can have a world where you don't tolerate bigotry and racism and homophobia and all of these things in society, whilst not sheltering people from the reality that it existed. Right? Like, to understand that something is wrong, to understand slavery was wrong, you can't not talk about slavery, because then people will rediscover slavery and not consider it wrong. You would have to do all that again. You cannot, cancel homophobia by canceling the fact that people were homophobic. In fact, it's counterproductive. And what it does is it creates an environment where people don't even consider it wrong at all, which is what the MAGA movement has become. It is normalized bigotry. It is normalized racism. It is normalized hate, whilst they ban the books that demonstrate that it was hate at all. I mean, it's very, and that's, I think, where your point is. The extreme left, right, says, oh, any of these things must never be spoken of. Like, how dare you mention, slavery, right? Like, that serves fascism. That serves far right autocracy, right? So, and so I guess my point in that is, I am unique in the sense that pardon my French here, okay? But last night I posted a note, okay? I said, "Dear Hakeem Jeffries, fuck you." That was my whole note, okay? And what was, Hakeem Jeffries and all these guys, they threw away Americans' health care. They ended the government shutdown for nothing, right? Like, and there's so many people who refuse to criticize the Democrats out of fear of somehow creating this massive division, or if we fight amongst ourselves, we'll be damned. Like, if you're not willing to hold anybody accountable, if you're not willing to say, well, no, you cannot erase the past. Historical revisionism in the name of equality is anything but. I think that's, I guess, to circularly close my little tirade here. That's kind of what that particular idea makes me think of.
Yeah. So, the term reconciliation is in our culture quite a bit here in Canada. Reconciliation with First Nations peoples, or we're now just calling them Indigenous. And that concept is a really important concept, because reconciliation is a two-way street. And one of the things that people do these days is they don't think in terms of a discussion or exploration of ideas to come up with the best ideas that may come up in a conversation, and that you should actually have a conversation with people that you disagree with, to test your own ideas and make sure that your own ideas, you're very proud of your own ideas, and you want to make sure that they're good by actually having them challenged. But people are in echo chambers on the internet because algorithms put us into echo chambers. And so the problem with echo chambers is that when you see something from outside your echo chamber, you feel threatened because you've identified your own personal self-worth based on everything that you. And when those things are challenged, people get their back up. They respond emotionally instead of responding with some calm and think about what's actually being said. But if everybody responds only emotionally, like my core is being challenged by this right-wing person that I disagree with, okay, get over it. And maybe think about, they feel strongly about what they are saying as well. And maybe if you had a conversation, both of you might mollify some of your more extreme views by having a discussion. This is virtually impossible these days. People will say, people on the left will say, oh, all conservatives are bad. They're bad people and they have bad ideas, and they shouldn't even be allowed to speak at our university. What? At a university? At a university, you let everybody speak. That's the whole point of a university, is that ideas are challenged. It isn't a church where you memorize a bunch of dogma. It's not a church, it's a university. And universities should be free to explore all ideas, whether you like them
I have a
or.
question for you though, on that note, because I don't disagree with you. But I also have to say that I do struggle with the notion of, I think there's free speech and there's hate speech. And I think that they must be distinguished. You can have free speech while not tolerating hate speech. Now, if you want to go to a university and argue the merits of unrestrained capitalism, go ahead. Now, if you want to go to a university and blame the Jews for poverty, you should get the fuck out. Pardon my language, but like,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? I think it's important that
Okay,
you
so
distinguish
perfect
those, I guess.
perfect example. My argument would be, let the person who has that view express it and defend with facts their argument. Let them try, and let the university community have an argument with them that proves their idea is not factually based. If you ban that person from presenting that argument, then you rob the intellectual community of the capacity to challenge the argument. So they
My
have to
fear
be allowed
in
to
that,
speak.
yeah, no, I understand. And I guess, to devil's advocate with you here, my fear would be that by platforming the idea, okay, like, again, it's okay to historically acknowledge that someone has argued this, right? Like, someone has argued X, Y, and Z, and historically they've been disproved, right? These arguments have happened before. Now, the danger in platforming the discussion is that you have your Ben Shapiro's of the world. Okay, it's very easy to, and normally I would say in a different, like, if you go back, say, 50 years, where it was hard to take a 20-second video clip and put it onto the internet without context of Ben Shapiro spraying a bunch of crime statistics like a fire hose at you, and then blaming black people, but then cutting out the part where the academic rebuts it. Um,
Right.
you know, I think in that particular regard, um, as times change, we need to be careful, because it's like, as much as I would love to say that, yes, you know what, the academic community will disprove them. The issue in America is that, I'm going to be blunt, people are dumb. Okay. People have been made exceptionally dumb in this country by design. To give you an example, I was watching a YouTube video, okay, of, it was, I don't know if you're familiar with Reddit, but basically it's just like the internet's dumping ground, right? Of just
Right.
anything you can imagine. And it was a thread of young people basically asking, "Hey, should I break up with this person? This is what happened. Blah 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 blah." Uh, Long and short, uh, you know, basically, he's going through these things, and I'm reading the messages he puts on the screen, and I'm watching these people, and I'm like, this person can't be more than 15 years old. I mean, this is the most immature dialogue, like the fact that they're talking, and I'm reading one particular message, and the way they're texting, he's like, you are, and abbreviating everything, and it's so awfully worded, and it's all misspelled, and I'm like, oh my god, this person must be 15, 16 years old. And then I thought, god, even if I was 15, 16 years old, I wouldn't write like that. And then I saw the person was 25 years old, and then I was like, oh my god, like, that's me. That's me. And so I can see a world where a institution invites an academic up on the stage, and they argue the merits of bigotry or whatever, and then people that can't even spell your and have to abbreviate it down to a 2-letter word that doesn't exist.
But look, Shane,
May
wait,
So that's my
yeah,
counter. That's, I
sure.
suppose
But
it's
here's my counter argument to you. Those people aren't in a university stadium hall listening to anybody. Those people don't even get admitted to university. This is not the context. You don't take it out of its context. At a university, you have people who've been admitted to university who are trying to pursue knowledge and
Mhm.
creative thinking. Okay, so I don't care about the 25-year-old who still spells like a 15-year-old. It's not relevant to this discussion. And the other thing I just want to challenge you on is a
Yeah.
word you used, okay? Because words are really important. You used a
Mhm.
word that is used very often by people who defend censorship of speakers based on their political allegiance. You used the word platforming, okay?
Mm.
Now,
Mhm.
universities do not platform speakers. They allow free dialogue to exist. As soon as woke people started attacking university administrations by saying they are platforming a speaker, they took away the actual uh, raison d'être is the French word, the actual essence and the reason for a university to exist. A university exists to challenge people on a continuous basis and to have opposing ideas bang against each other so that people can develop their critical capacity. And as soon as you take that away from a university, it's no longer a university, it's a church where you have to memorize data and information that is pushed into you like a church pushes religion into you. And that's why I really disagree with that word platforming, because universities don't platform, they present speakers from all across the spectrum. And that's their job. And as soon as anybody, left or right, says that universities have to stop doing that, they're asking a university to stop being a university. That's my
Okay,
take on it.
so absolutely, and I think you're valid in the term platforming, and so I guess where my particular struggle is with this concept, because I agree with you. I agree with you in principle, and I want it to be true. It's just my life experience seeing how these principles that are noble are disseminated through the social media. A great comment. Charlie Kirk has ruined my generation of young men. Where did he go? Everywhere was a university, and everywhere he went, because of how these people, unfortunately, all good, it goes back to all good things are ruined by those who abuse them, right? And in that sense, they have abused the credibility and the the notion of an educated and true dialogue like one we're having here has been ruined by these people, by them like Charlie Kirk going and arguing and having a credibility on a college campus, and he's a college educated man, yet he's also arguing that the Civil Rights Act was a mistake, and
Okay,
that
so,
that's a political, and that hits the
okay, so,
social media like wildfire, and
okay,
that's where I get stuck.
okay. So let's unstick this. Why is it now? First of all, you blame Charlie Kirk for that, right? But why was Charlie Kirk so successful? He was so successful because the education system has been weakened for decades.
I agree
The
with that.
education system has been transformed from a place of free thought and exchange of ideas to a place where people who can afford get in, not people who are necessarily brilliant, and that they have to conform to certain ideas that have become part of the social norm of teaching at universities. You have new generations of professors who want students to conform to their agenda. They want their students
Correct.
to become followers. These are not these are no longer university professors. A university professor who wants acolytes, who wants followers, is a religious leader, not a professor. A professor
Right.
challenges people to think, to develop, first of all, to develop their own critical thinking skills and to accept and have arguments with other people. The reason Charlie Kirk could succeed is because people who would challenge him, there were very few who would challenge him based on sound thinking and rejecting all of the deflections that people use in arguments today. And if you don't mind, I want to take this opportunity to go back into that book I read. And there's a very important section that talks about, I'll quote it,
Yeah.
dirty tricks that both the right and
Hmm.
left weaponize to um, make discourse basically dysfunctional, so that I win, you lose. But you actually haven't had a discussion, and nothing has been discovered. No, nothing has been learned. It's just I win, you lose. Number one, whataboutism. Defending against
Yes.
criticism of your side by bringing up the other side's alleged wrongdoing. Happens all the time. Um,
Oh yeah.
Capitol 6 riots, January 6th riots. Um, the left says, January 6th riots. The right says, Black Lives Matter riots. And then they just yell at each other for a while. And once they're exhausted, they stop. And nothing has happened. Number two, straw man. Misrepresenting the opposition's perspective by constructing a weak, inaccurate version of their argument and then saying, oh, look, it's so easy to refute that. Okay, so that happens left and right. Just saying, oh, look, their argument is so weak, and here's how it's weak, and therefore it's just not valuable at all. Now, if you don't allow your opposition to say, what are you talking about? My argument is not weak. Here are the strong points. Then you don't get a discussion. So that's straw man, you know. And then another one is minimization, claiming that a problem doesn't exist or it's too small to worry about. Yeah, that's a little small problem over there in Gaza. You know, these people. You know, it's all Hamas, and you know, it's just we can kill them all because they're all Hamas. It's like minimizing. That's a bad example, perhaps, but you know, it's not happening. Well, how many times does Trump say, "Oh no, that's not happening"? No, you know,
It's
he tries
denial.
to minimize constantly something that's really important. Oh, we're just going to kill them all. That's against international law. You can't just say we're going to go kill them all. We're going to blow up boats without evidence, you know. Um, and then let's do a fourth one. Conflating two arguments, a reasonable one and an unreasonable one. So in other words, you say, because, and you point at the unreasonable argument, that means that your argument is no good. And it goes on. I'll just give you the headlines because otherwise we'll be here all day. There's 10 of them all together.
Okay.
Underdogging, claiming that your viewpoint is more valid than your opponent's because you are
They're not listening to me. Yeah, like you're not hearing me because, yeah, I got you.
because I'm disabled or because I'm racialized or whatever. In other words,
Yep.
instead of going straight for the argument, you say, oh, because I'm a racialized person, my argument is valid or whatever. Or because, you know, because I'm a superior race, my argument is better. And okay, accusations of bad faith, hypocrisy projection, and oh, that's offensive. That's offensive to me, so shut up. Who cares if it's offensive to you? Be offended. Have a discussion, right? Number 9. Oh, I like this. I like this term. Offense archaeology. Digging through someone's past comments to find speech that hasn't aged well. That's a big one.
Oh,
Okay. Basically, somebody applies for a really important position, and then the people who don't want them to have that position dig through their social media feed and find out that when they were 15 years old, they made a racist remark. And because when they made a racist remark when they were 15, they don't deserve to have a job at the age of 30. Come on. That's bullshit. And that's done all the time. People lose their job opportunity because they're people who want that job, or people who oppose them because they think they're too woke or whatever, or too right wing, they'll go into their social media feed and they'll find something that they said when they were an irresponsible teenager, and they'll say, "Oh, you see, this person believes this." Really nasty. And making stuff up. That's the last one.
Yeah.
Making stuff up.
So, I think like I agree in principle. I really do. However, America is so this is just my observation. Like all of the things you just, discussed, right? You just said all of those flaws. That is exactly what Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk do
Exactly.
on camera. And you said something that the problem was not that people didn't present great arguments against them. I disagree. I used to watch the videos all the time in full. It's not that he wasn't disproved or absolutely roasted. It's that when he lost, it was never ever shared. And that is the problem. There's the ideal, which is I agree idealistically that this is all I want this to be true. I want this all to exist. But my lived reality is that in America, and maybe it's different in Canada. Maybe you guys probably have more stringent fact checking laws, what you can and can't post, how things are done. I guarantee you have better access to information, much better education, and so America is unfortunately in a position where they have mastered the art of platforming lies, of ad hominem, of straw man, of whataboutism, of how
Right.
many times I've seen Ben Shapiro go, "Oh, well, your argument is this. What about the fact that black men account for 45% of the crime in these areas?" Well, you're citing a statistic, Ben, without really the giving the nuance of the fact that, well, of course they're 45% because you're talking about an entirely black community. But the reality is that the majority of the crime, that's not 45%, is the minority of white people. But you're not talking about that.
Oh yeah, of
But
course.
they can sit there on a university or speak at these universities to hundreds of men, hundreds of young men. And this is where there is a real crisis in America, a real one that is a sleeping giant. And it is that entire generations of young men. And I have to say, there was a good comment earlier in regards to the fact that people in college tend to be 18 to 21, and they're in the formative phase of their development and their brain, right? This is a key part of their lives. It's what
Right.
shapes them. And university, in our ideal world, in a world where we embrace a Socratic approach and we say, well, you say this, I say this, and this. These are my questions to you. Please let us continue. But we've lost that here in America.
Yeah.
And I, as much as I want to say that, like, the way back is there, it's like the way back is to find a way to shut these people the F up and teach and really like get information
Oh,
out there. And like if you allow this to
I can't
continue, that's
listen. I
how
can't,
they do it.
no, I can't agree with you that the way to move forward is to shut down ideas you don't like and only teach ideas that you like. I can't possibly agree with that. There's just no way.
I don't
The way
so just to clarify,
you said,
I'm not
tell them
saying
to
don't
shut the
teach
fuck up. You
ideas.
said, tell them
No,
to shut
but
the
just
fuck up.
yeah, I want to clarify. I'm not saying don't teach these things. I'm not saying don't teach the fact that these are bigoted racist ideas that have been shown and shared over time. They should be taught. What I'm saying is that if something is disproven, if vaccines do not, empirically proven, do not cause autism by an abundance of scientific experts, academics, then nobody in a university should allow an individual to step up on a stage and say, vaccines cause autism, and then have that recorded from a speech at Bayern University or wherever the hell they are, or at some university, and shared through that.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't talk about them. I'm saying don't regurgitate them.
Yeah.
That's all I'm trying to say.
So the argument that you're making right now is a really important one, because what you're saying is, if the consensus, the scientific consensus
Yes.
when it comes to science, or the intellectual consensus when it comes to ideas, when that consensus is pretty clear, like 95% clear, let's say, you may consider not allowing someone to speak. But here's the problem with that. It's sort of the capital punishment problem. What if the 95% actually are this much wrong, and that person that everybody disagrees with has an original idea that hasn't been considered yet? That's the problem with shutting it down, is that you might miss out on a very important concept that nobody else has thought of. And university's primary purpose is to develop the human mind so that some of those people who challenge the consensus come forward. It's actually part of the scientific method. If you don't agree with the scientific method, you agree with shutting things down. If you agree with the scientific method, you agree that as a scientist, you can't say this is how it is, period, shut down science. No, we have to let the new ideas, no matter how crazy they seem to the majority, we have to let new ideas in. And that's the problem with shutting down the people you don't like.
So I agree again that you shouldn't shut out new ideas. Like I do want to emphasize this. My issue is not that. I do believe that the 95% looking at a situation, as they're developing vaccines, for example, where we have boards of excellent doctors. Okay.
Right.
The reality is that our measles cases in the United States, the amount of infants dying is skyrocketing. Why? Because universities and all of these big institutions platform vaccine deniers, and Americans take these people being platformed by supposedly credible institutions and choose not to give their child a vaccine. The USDA.
Hang on. Are you saying universities do that? I don't think universities do that. I think that's
all kinds of places, because there's universities in America that are hardly universities. They're propaganda stations, right? Like, again, it's the title versus the reality. And so in this case, what I guess I want to establish is that what you're saying is true, but also what I'm saying has to also be true, because I'm also seeing this. And so if both are true, in the sense that what I suppose my alternative to combine both of our things is the community itself, the scientists developing the vaccines should be having that discussion. They should be saying, well, is it possible? Is it possible that vaccines cause autism? And as we go about these things in our studies, we should test. However, they should not disseminate a 5% minority to the public. They should have those discussions internally as intellectuals. That's my point.
Yeah, so I totally agree with that. And that comes to an important point about legacy media having balanced reporting, right? Balanced reporting means that if you have somebody who you have two people who are guests, one person who represents most of us, and then because it's balanced, you have to have the opposite side, and they have to have the discussion that I'm encouraging people to have, right? I'm saying that discussion should happen. But oftentimes, when it's presented as a 50-50 balance, people think it's a 50-50 balance, and they should choose one of those two. But it reminds me of a John Oliver sketch, my namesake, of course, where he says, okay, so let's bring in a proportion of people who are climate science deniers and climate science researchers who agree and have a consensus. And the room is filled with, like 100 people, two of whom are climate science deniers. It's a huge comedy moment, and it makes the point that balanced journalism isn't balanced. It's BS, right? And so that's more or less what you're saying, and I have to agree. And that's the problem, is the notion that some arguments can be quickly and easily dispensed with, but people
Right.
allow, and again, you can almost use the term platforming, which I disagreed with earlier. Legacy media is almost platforming these ridiculous counter arguments that all the consensus in the intellectual world has already said, no, no, that's full of shit.
And that's
That's basic stuff, man. That's basic knowledge. It's not even advanced argument here. It's an argument between somebody who barely understands anything, who's asserting a piece of absolutely provable bullshit, against a respected academic. You can't put these two people on the same stage and say that there's some kind of equal thing for the public to consider. It's a joke.
yes.
And that's, yeah, you're alluding to
Absolutely. I
that.
think
And
we've
I
achieved
totally agree with
harmony. I think through our discussion, we've achieved harmony in that. The scariest thing about all of this to me, John, is that the people who do this, the most talented, the Charlie Kirk, the Ben Shapiro, they know that they're lying. They know that they're wrong, but they know how to build a straw man argument that is apparently ironclad.
yeah.
And it allows them to infiltrate academic circles because they are allowed to they know how to speak the lingo. They know how to say, well, actually, da da da. They can sound like one thing whilst being the opposite. That is who I find most dangerous, and these are the people who are taking lots of money, like Tucker Carlson from Russia, right? Like, he's a very good talker. You cannot take away the fact that Tucker Carlson knows how to spin an argument, right? You can't take away the fact that Ben Shapiro can rattle off numbers with the best of them.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
what I can tell you is, if I had a discussion with Ben Shapiro, I would tell him to slow down. That's how you stop someone like Ben Shapiro. Well, Ben, hold up. You just said a number. Can we talk about that number?
Right.
I don't care about the other 10. I want to talk about the one thing you just said that has me exceptionally confused. I feel
Right.
like you're misrepresenting that data, but they don't want to let you get in a word edgewise.
That's why
They
they talk.
want you. And that's, what you just, all those 10 things, they're masters. To give a modern reference, from my generation, if you were looking to be the avatar of, the argumentative misinformation avatar, which is the avatar. I don't know if you've heard of it, but basically he's the master of all of the elements in this TV show I grew up watching: earth, fire, water, air, right? And he's the only one who can master all of these things. That's what they have become. It's a skill. That's what, and that's what we're fighting. That's why a discussion like we've had today, where we eventually reach a sense of harmony, where we understand where each other are coming from, and realize the merit of both sides to create a unity of an argument, to not an argument in a sense of maliciousness, but of two perspectives to reach a shared conclusion.
Yeah.
That is something that an avatar of misinformation will never allow.
Right. And that's because it would actually require a change in what they are presenting. When you are an advocate and you are proselytizing for an idea or a religion, there is no counter argument. You just simply, there isn't one. You either believe what I believe or you go away. And it reminds me of the Oxford debates when I first heard Ben Shapiro. And this was in London and at Oxford. And he was there across the table from people who would come up and challenge him. And I remember that, first of all, he spoke as fast as he always does.
I hate him
But
so much.
what I remember is what I remember most about it is that they never got to, or rarely, he managed to defeat a lot of people who challenged him by asking this question: do you believe the state of Israel should exist? And when the answer was no, that was the end of the discussion. Now, in my view, that's the beginning of that discussion.
Correct.
Should
Absolutely.
Israel exist? That is a very important question that, if it's seriously addressed, people will consider the complex history of the establishment of the state of Israel,
Mhm.
the period before it was established, and so on and so forth. All of that stuff that anybody in their right mind will have researched over the last 2 to 3 years. But he just shut them down. As soon as they said the state of Israel should not exist, he just said, okay, that's the end of the argument then. Because if you don't agree with that, then there is no conversation. So
The moral
that
wall,
that is
supposed moral wall.
that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And that is the excuse that's used over and over again for people to justify genocide. They just say,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the Holocaust happened, therefore we can do whatever we want. No,
Yeah.
sorry, that's not a moral
Yeah.
argument at all.
Yeah.
So
You know, there's, go ahead.
that I was just going to say, and that is relying on people to respond emotionally to the topic rather than with knowledge and contemplation and creative thinking. And that appeal to the emotion, to say that that's all that matters. All that matters is your emotions and your own personal experience to date.
Mhm.
Whereas the intellectual approach is somewhat the opposite. It's like, mollify your emotions, calm down, and think about the future. Don't think only about what exists and only the ideas that you already know. Challenge those ideas and see if you can push your way forward into new ideas. These are opposite ways of
Yeah.
thinking, and the emotional way of thinking is predominant in our society right now, which is why people can't criticize anything. I mean, blowing boats up with no evidence, destroy the evidence and claim the moral high ground. Come on, what kind of
Yeah.
society is that?
No, yeah. Again, it's your, that's the whole thing. It's like, oh, well, Ben Shapiro says to me, oh, do you think the state of Israel should exist? You know what, Ben? I'd actually like to ask you two questions instead. Do you think any state should respect the sovereignty of its neighboring states? And do you believe that invading a sovereign state based on your own claims uh, and disrespecting the international law in the regards of the lives of human beings is
Right,
acceptable
right,
when fighting terrorism?
right. And
Oh,
even
okay. I don't want to talk about whether Israel should exist. I have no interest in that. Israel can exist if it respects the laws of the international order, if it respects the very foundation of whether humans have a right to live,
that
if
what
it
you
respects the facts that children should not be slaughtered for no
right,
reason,
right,
then Israel can exist.
right.
Um,
Well, this is exactly just to tell you that when Francesca Albanese was asked essentially the same question, her answer was, "Of course, Israel has the right to exist. Israel exists. Italy exists. France exists. But," and then she listed, you have to exist within an international order, and you have to, be good to your neighbors, and you should be punished if you aren't. But right to exist, well, it exists. And she gave an example. If France and Italy want to join and merge tomorrow and become a different country, they have the right to do that. And I found that to be brilliant, because this is the problem, is that people, they don't want to think of the broad picture of, of the situation over time, in other words, historically and now, and try to think of the complete picture and its, moral dimension as well. And that's one of the problems with the time that we live in, is that people, when they critique whatever, whether it's government policy or a foreign government's policy, they have to have a broader context that includes a moral question. that
Yeah.
moral questioning,
I
I would say.
I think that's um I think that's a good bow on today's dialogue. I think that I think we really achieved in our free form format the nature of dialogue. And I hope that the next time you and someone disagree, um, maybe instead of, doing all the things we talked about, say, I hear you, but
Right.
posit this, my friend, because while at the beginning it seemed like we were entirely diametrically opposed, in reality, we were not at all. So, in that sense, that's where we, as here at the Firebrand Project, that's our core mission. That's the core of the dialogue, is to try and model what real civic discourse looks like,
Right.
between not only two people who are different in age, but two people from different countries,
Right.
who come from an entirely different place, and to prove that not only is that kind of discussion possible, it's very valuable, and I hope that all of you guys enjoyed this discussion today. I know I did. It's always a pleasure to hang out with John every Wednesday, and in that regard, I ask that you support us both. So that we can continue to come to you guys every Wednesday with this show to continue the dialogue. Please go and subscribe to my good friend John. Go listen to his music.
Likewise.
It's super good. I love listening to John's music, and he is a very talented person, and he's a great op-ed writer. Very based and grounded in reality, but he's got strong opinions, and they're worth listening to.
Have a, I can plug something, Shane. I
Yes.
have one of the reasons I've been so busy this week is that I have an album coming out.
Oh,
That's why before we started, I said, "Oh, we were going to do this show on this thing, but I've been so busy." So I have an album coming out. Let everybody know about it. It's called "Out of Tune, Out of Time," and it's coming out
nice.
soon on Bandcamp. John Alderman
Nice.
Bandcamp.
All right. Well,
So
we'll have to see next week. Um, well, maybe we can talk a little bit more about that, because that'll be exciting. But guys, free paid subscriptions helps make it all happen. We really appreciate you joining us for today's dialogue. The recording will be posted later if you missed the beginning, or if you're watching this and you are still. Actually, if you're watching this, then you made it here this far. But if you missed the beginning, the recording will be posted later. So thank you all so very much for joining us. It's been a true pleasure. And remember, the dialogue must continue. Take our discussion, take it to your community center, take it to church, take it to the bus stop, take it to your favorite cafe. And you know what? Maybe talk to that person who's sitting next to you that appears to be willing to carry the conversation, because that's how we change the national dialogue in America, is one firebrand at a time. So thank you guys. And we will see you all next week. John, any closing words, farewells?
great to talk to you this week, Shane. I look forward to whatever we come up with next week.
Absolutely. Goodbye, my friends. Burn bright,
Care.
resist.
Bye.
We'll talk to you later.